is there a single one thing that can make a relationship work really well? Is there a foundational element that you can find to connect with someone, whether it's an intimate partner or a business partner or some friends? Is there something really foundational, fundamental that you can focus on that's going to dramatically shift how you interact with the people that you share time with? Let's find out as Karey and I discuss love, relationships, and all that shit.
Welcome to Share.care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
G'day, Karey. How are you going?
Yeah, good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Enjoying this. We finally got a bit of summer coming over here in the southern part of the world.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, it's going to be.
Spring is breaking free here, so that's nice.
Yeah, well, we're supposed to be in autumn, but now we're starting to get temperatures getting close to the 40s, which is
Oh, wow.
late summer. Anyway, it is what it is.
Yeah, an Indian summer. That's what we call an Indian summer, and that tends to happen for us here in the Netherlands, at least in like September. September tends to be like the most beautiful time of year because. Yeah, indeed. You get these like warm temperatures and not a ton of rain, but it's still kind of cool in the evenings and stuff. So you get this false sense that like, yes, it's going to stay warm. And then no.
Well, it's like that because I know I can see at the back the trees are starting to yellow and sort of autumn is coming for us, or fall for those listening in the States.
Yeah.
Got to translate.
Exactly. We use both, but yes, thank you for us Americans.
But we didn't really have much of a summer, and now we got the next 5 days or so are going to be high 30s, nearly 40. It's like I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but anyway,
it's hot. It's like in the low 90s, I think.
Yeah,
high 80s, low 90s. Again, for those Americans listening, I still, I've been living in Amsterdam now in the Netherlands for 4.5 years, and I still have to wait, 9 degrees, 13 degrees. What is that? So I'm constantly flipping in my weather app from Fahrenheit to Celsius, just because I still kind of can't quite. The meters and the kilometers and things like that, I feel comfortable with, but the Celsius versus Fahrenheit, I'm still like 13. Ugh, that's freezing. And then I'm like, oh, actually, that's not so bad. It's like mid 50s. That's okay. So, anyways,
it's a bit like that. I'm like that with metric imperial because I do talk in feet and inches at times, and because I watch NASCAR and I'm used to miles per hour and doing that translation in my head fairly easily. But relate to that reasonably well. But anyway, we're off topic, and because we were going to talk about love, relationships, and all that shit.
That's right. But I think it's kind of relevant because, as we dive into it, I'm going to get sort of real existential here for a minute. But if I'm a Fahrenheit gal and you're a Celsius guy and we're in relationship, sometimes it gets lost in translation. So I think it is relevant in that we do in relationship have to figure out how to communicate in a way that we understand each other. And sometimes that can be tricky. And you've got to wait, is there an app? Can I convert that? What does that mean? How do I Google Translate? What does this mean?
But I was reading that, listening to that, there's a guy that I used to listen to and I've spoken to as well. His name's Mark Gungor. He's a pastor. He wrote a program or has a program called Laugh Your Way to a Better Marriage. And he talks on that about how and there's a little snippet on YouTube from that where it's called The Tale of Two Brains. And what he talks about is how, and we've read, I'm sure most of us have heard of Mars and Venus, that book, and how we think differently. I'm not sure how it works for same gender couples, but because I'm not versed in that, but I've got a lot of friends. I should have asked them. I've got a lot of friends in that. But anyway, digressing. It's my ADD kicking in. It's with, but
that's the next episode, is that you have a same-sex, you have someone that identifies as LGBTQI come and talk about relationships, get some insight from that side of the program.
How do we communicate in that? Yeah, that's a good idea. But they're talking about, Mark was talking about how, from that perspective, he's relating it that we actually talk about it from the perspective of we care about the other person, we love them a lot, but when we see them needing help or wanting to care about it, we care about it from our perspective of world and not theirs. And he highlights from the context of, certainly with problems, when we're dealing with problems, women particularly like, and we're speaking, generally here in stereotypical terms, women generally like to talk about their problems, whereas men prefer to not talk about them, and we go to what he calls the nothing box, where we just need to. That's why apparently why men like fishing and other stuff. That's why I'm Forrest Gump. I like going out there with the lawnmower, going backwards and forwards, and that's how I deal with de-stress. He said that's where the problems come in, is when you've got a problem, they see their partner who are having a problem. And for example, he might see her and she's got a problem, and she starts to talk about his problem, and he approaches it from how he would deal with it, and it's just not talk about it and go to his nothing box. And so he goes, just quit talking about it. And that's when she starts pulling out knives and go, what?
Right. You never listen. Yeah.
And then the other way, it's like when he has a problem, she sees it, so she's caring and wanting to go, okay, when I have a problem, I talk about it. So, honey, talk about it. And he's like, I don't want to talk about it. I just want to go to a nothing box. And it's, how much do you think of that, like from your experience? Because when I look back at communication in relationships where there's been issues in the relationships that I've had, some of it, I know I've a number of warm discussions, shall we say. We won't call them arguments. Call them warm discussions.
Passionate discussions.
Yeah, that's a better way. Have been about where it was communicating, where I've cared and gone, okay, I've seen and I've said something in what I thought was helping, and it just made it worse. How much do you think of it is actually that, where we are actually caring but just not really understanding how the other person needs to be cared for?
Yeah, I think it's a huge thing, because my current husband and I have a saying that is, what I say is about
on a limited thing. Is your current husband?
Well,
my ex-wife used to call me her current husband, right? And I ended up not being her husband anymore.
Okay, well, all right. So that is not my intention, but that's a funny, maybe Freudian slip. And I guess I said it that way because since we are talking about relationships, it will come out that that my current husband is my third husband. So I've been divorced twice.
Yeah.
And so I said it that way just because I think as we go throughout our discussion today, I'll be referring to like previous ones. But moving forward, I will say my husband, because I fully intend for him to be my husband till I die. So my current husband and I have a saying that is, what I say is about me and what you hear is about you. And what we mean by that is, I'm talking to you and telling you about what I'm experiencing, and I'm talking about myself, but you're hearing what I'm saying through your filter, your experience, your nothing box, how you would deal with this problem, what memories and reactions, what I'm saying triggers in you. And so sometimes, so I think that that's accurate. The other thing that my husband and I practice quite a bit, and sort of a rules of engagement, I guess, that we've set up for each other, is to say, it is never, never, never my intention to be mean, cruel, or to hurt you. So if something I say lands that way on you, no, first and foremost, that's not my intention. And secondly, to say that what I'm hearing is, or what you said, I'm feeling this way based on what you've said. And that allows me to sort of say, oh, wait, hang on. Can I get a take two? Let me say that differently, because that's not what I meant. That's not how I meant that to land. And I think that goes back to like this trust that, that we're in this together. I heard someone say, and I don't remember now who it was, but I like your analogy of this like empty box. And this person said, you know, marriage is a lot like if you as a couple can get to a place where you both understand and agree that you're reading the same book.
Yeah.
But I might just be on a different chapter than you.
Yeah.
But we're in the same book. Then it's a bit not, it kind of takes away the like, no, my book is better. No, your book is better. It's like, no, we're in the same one.
And don't compare as to, it's not, you know, I'm ahead of you in the book.
Exactly. We're just in different chapters. So we're in this together, but
the book that goes around in circles. There's no forward or backwards.
Exactly. So I do think that's true. And, you know, I mean, we all have our own personal ways of dealing with life. We have our examples we gleaned from our parents, from our society, from our religion, from our own life experiences. Perhaps we've been super open and communicative about our feelings and how we felt, and someone in our past has used that against us or really smashed our hearts, and then therefore we've put up a wall. And just so I mean, human relationships are tricky to navigate. They just are, no matter how much work you've done on yourself. It's just, it's part of it.
Do you think part of that too, because I mean, it's very easy to blame the other person, which is quite common. And I must say in my history, I've been very guilty of that myself. And when I look back at that, a lot of it was my insecurity as well. And so when someone would be doing something, I'd think, oh, you know, do they still care about me? And then I'd get, you know, upset, and I'd question it. Say, what are you doing that for? And that kind of thing. Because I remember in times where I really cared about someone, I was like, and then I'm trying to think of examples now, because maybe I blocked it out. But it. But it's just not part, but I know it happened, and I just want to. I was wanting to kind of explore that from that side of things, and maybe I should have done my own research in my own head before I brought up that topic. But because I just wonder how much of it we create too if we actually stop. And because I love what you said about the intention, that you have this. It was never my intention to do that, and I've heard that before, where they approach it from the other way, was from when partner says something, to approach it from, regardless of what they're doing, I'm going to trust that their intention is that they love me. And if I feel something, I'm going to ask them about that. So it's similar to what you're doing. So it's both people can do that.
Absolutely.
And that's where I was wondering, from that perspective, you know, how to have that trust. Because you really got to really have a bit of faith in yourself as well, a bit of liking. Because if you don't like yourself very much, everything's going to be more likely to be reviewed as pretty negative. Because I have some other friends who are relationship counselors. They're a married couple that, you know, I think they're in the late 60s, early 70s, been married since they were teenagers. But they talk about it, and they wrote a book on this, about that you don't have marriage problems. You're two people with problems that you bring to the marriage.
Great.
And that's where I wanted to go with that, from that perspective. And I was just thinking, you know, how do you do that in the relationship? And you realize, okay, I've got this issue. I'm getting upset at this. It's actually my issue, not the other person's issue. I know it's probably a self-awareness thing, which is I've always tried to work out how do you become self-aware. It's kind of like, maybe work that out. We'll know when the robot's going to take over. They became self-aware by like doing this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you become self-aware first and foremost. Well, I think the first step to becoming self-aware is to realize you're not very self-aware. Right? Like, The first step is to be like, wow, absolutely everything that happens in my life, whether it's with my partner or a stranger on the street, I react in some combative, defensive, angry, irritated sort of way, or wounded, victim, woe is me, why does this always happen, helpless sort of way. I react in some sort of way that is not empowering. I think like just recognizing that, like, dang, every time I road rage and in the grocery store, and I'm just like, I'm kind of always irritated and angry and waiting for someone to piss me off, or I'm sort of always a little anxious and shy and waiting for like the sky to fall in. And if you can at least become like that aware of like, whoa, that's happening, then I think you can take the next step, which is, what do I need? Do I need to find someone who can help me unpack this, a counselor, a coach, or whatever, a friend? Do I need books? Do I need, like, what do I need? Do I want to shift from this? And then, you know, what's the next step? And then you can sort of start on your self-awareness journey.
Yeah.
And I think it's like an onion. It never, you know, you continue to peel back and get more and more, as the kids say these days, woke, you know, about, and I think
I hate
really,
that term.
oh my gosh, I know, because it's just like been so overused. It's gross, but
and it's really, from my experience, or from what I've seen, that the meaning of work is an awareness, but it's you might be awareness, but are you actually doing something different? In most cases, what I've seen is they're going, oh yeah, I'm aware, but they're doing exactly the same thing that they were doing before. And it's like,
yeah,
awareness.
exactly.
Sorry, that's my little
Exactly. I know. I 100% agree. So yeah, they use it as a way to be like, you're not using the pronouns correctly, or whatever the thing is that they want to be woke about in that moment.
I'm concerned about the environment, but I've got a new iPhone and a new this that it needs all these resources that we've got to do.
Exactly. So, but to go back to what you were saying, I think so. Yes, I think awareness is key. Absolutely key. Awareness of yourself is key to having successful relationships, full stop. Friends, family, romantic, work. Like, self-awareness is, I think, the number one key to having a successful relationship, in whatever way you define a successful relationship. Because a successful relationship for me might look very different than one for you.
That's really important that you raise that. I'm sorry to interrupt there, but because for you, and I wonder how much trouble we get in. I know from my perspective, when I was younger, that's something definitely I did wrong. You know, I remember one specific time I met this girl, and she was a really lovely girl, and then we were there with my friends and going, see, what do you guys think about her? And it's like, that shouldn't have even come up. It's like, but how many times do we do that we're worried, we're looking for someone that other people, and even it's not just friends, it can be parents. That has happened.
I think it's more often parents or our religious society that, like, does this person fit the mold of what I should be choosing? And without even looking like, what do I truly want? Maybe I want to be alone, you know, but
that's
as a female,
because
you know, maybe I just want to be in relationship with myself. But then particularly as female, or a female from the Mormon religion, which is what I was raised in, coming from Salt Lake City, that's like, you're wasting your life. You're a woman. Your purpose as a woman is to be a wife and a mother. And if you want anything less, or you don't achieve those things for whatever reason, you're less than. So that perpetuates this like settling. And so many people are in relationships that are unfulfilling, that are unhappy, that are abusive. And I don't mean necessarily mental or physical or even on purpose, but abusive because you are being abusive to yourself by not listening to your own heart and soul and your needs, because you're so concerned about what your parents, what your family, what your religion, what your society will think, rather than like what you know in your heart and soul will make you happy. And sometimes that is, in fact, being not in a partnership.
It's really interesting you mentioned, because I struggle with that from the perspective of I had the opposite, which I hated as a kid. I really hated it. My mum was always, doesn't matter what anyone thinks, doesn't matter, do whatever you want. And I'd look at her and take the beanie off. It looks horrible. Although beanies are cool now, but back then they weren't cool. And
right.
and yes, I hated it as a kid, but I think and I'm grateful for it, but I don't fully appreciate what it's like to have that kind of pressure to behave a certain way. As much as I said, and I just said, well, maybe I did, because I asked my friends about whether they liked my girlfriend. But I wonder whether there was a part where I went through. So there's parts that I'm kind of missing, I guess. But because I think about it now and I go, it doesn't bother me what anybody thinks about any part of what I want for me. Even in a relationship, it's like this is right for me, and we need to fit together. Which is another topic we'll come to later. But it was, so I'm just wondering, how does someone break out from that? Especially if you've grown with a religion, because you had that experience with a religion. How does someone break out from that? How do they go, well, actually, I need to do what's right for me? And you can do it politely, because I didn't when I was younger, but I do now. Just go politely. If something's not right, I just say that's not right for me, and this is what I need.
Right.
And politely say that, and if you don't agree, that's okay. We can go our separate ways, no problem.
Right.
And I do that in business, whatever. But I'm just wondering what it was like to.
Well, I think for me, in my experience, it took a whole lot of life and making choices and decisions that didn't always turn out well, and slowly sort of marching down my journey of life towards more awareness. But I think, frankly, the other component or the key to a successful relationship is to fully embrace and understand your individual self-worth and worthiness, and to let go of the fear. I think kind of what you were saying just a little bit ago about how you used to react in relationships. I think that's all sort of based on fear. Fear that if I'm alone, if they leave me, it means something about me being a horrible person. If again, kind of going back to my thing, without a husband, without a family, I, as a woman, am worthless.
Yeah.
Right. And so having that belief about myself caused me to settle and choose men who were not right for me, who further damaged my self-esteem, who were abusive. And so it was a bit, and I've kind of had these like lightning in a bottle moments, which I think we talked about in a previous podcast that you and I talked about this like moment of self-awareness to say, no, enough's enough. I'm getting my son and I'm leaving.
Yes. Yeah.
And, I think
we can repeat things because the audience keeps growing and growing. So there's new people listening all the time.
So I just got pregnant with my high school sweetheart. We married over Christmas break of my senior year when I was 17 years old. Walked in my cap and gown in June, turned 18 in February, walked in my cap and gown in June, had my son at the end of June. And by the time I was 21 and my son had turned 3, we were divorced. And the reason for that was because I talked a bit about how everyone has this different idea of what a successful relationship is. My son's father had grown up in an incredibly abusive, alcoholic, drug addicted family. That were constantly fighting, yelling, screaming, dishes flying, smacking people around, belittling one another. That was commonplace. That's what he knew. Yeah. Whereas I grew up in an incredibly unconditionally loving family. My parents are going to be celebrating their 48th wedding anniversary, but they met when they were like 14. So they've been together for like 50 something years. It's crazy. And they still hold hands and make out in the grocery store. Like they're still madly in love with each other. So here he has that as his example of what marriage and life and relationship look like. And I have that. I have mine. And we come together because I'm not worthy unless I have a man. I'm not enough if I'm not a mother. I had some other, like teenage childhood things of having this beautiful Polynesian best friend who was like an absolute goddess in whitewashed Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
And boys, you know, you're puberty and you're starting to like want the attention of the for me, boys.
Yeah.
And they would all come to me and I would think, oh, they like me. That means I'm cute and la, la, la. And then, do you think that she would go out with me? Does she have a date for the dance? Right. So then those small experiences began to say, oh, I'm not desirable. I'm not worthy. So then when this person comes along and is attracted to me, we end up, you know, having sex in the back of our car under the freaking water tower.
Yeah.
And I get pregnant.
Yeah.
You know, and he wasn't right for me. And our ideas of what success and love, a successful relationship and love and family looked like were absolutely on the opposite ends of the spectrum. And I had this moment of clarity that was like, I will not subject my son to this, because right now I'm creating for him the blueprint of what family and love and relationship look like. And I am not going to give him this blueprint. So I left.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it goes back to, I think, fear and self-worth and really finding the right therapist, coach, books, friends, examining your life experience, all of that combined, using it to figure out and really embrace and love yourself, your self-worth, that by myself alone, on my own 2 feet, with my own heart and desire and souls and life experiences, regardless of what's happened, regardless of the choices that I made, I am worthy. And I don't need anybody else in my life. I can want other people in my life, but I don't need them. Yeah. Like that Jerry Maguire line, like, you complete me. I think that's from Jerry Maguire. You complete me.
Yeah.
That's a bunch of bullshit. Yeah. Nobody should complete you. They can be the icing on the cake, the glitter on your crown, you know, the confetti in your cannon, whatever you like. But to complete you, I don't know. I think
because there's something with that, that you complete me part of it, because I think there's something more to be gained. I mean, you should be a complete person first, and only when you are maybe this is it. You're a complete person first. You meet someone else who's a complete person, but then the 1 + 1 = more than 2. But you have to be complete first. Maybe that's the way the formula works. But it is, you need to.
Yeah, and because sorry, go ahead.
No, I had a long story, so you go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, going back to what you were saying about your relationships, is that if you're not a complete person and you're looking for that final puzzle piece to fit in, right? Then whenever that final puzzle piece starts to maybe change its shape and morph into something else, your whole picture of yourself starts to fall apart. No. If you change this corner, if you take this out, then what am I? I'm incomplete again. And I think that's when we in relationship tend to start to get jealous, angry, combative, needy, bickering, like all of those things come to because we start to think, oh, whoa, if you, this person that completes me, do anything different for yourself, then what does that mean about me? How does that affect me? Rather than like, you're a whole person on your own and you can do your thing because I'm a whole person by myself.
It's interesting that, because I mean, I'm looking at that and going through my history, which I really haven't shared much. So you're probably one of the first people that I'm going to share it to in a public forum. It's because I look at it and that whether you like yourself or not, and you know, my example of a relationship wasn't. I mean, there was a lot of good and there wasn't some stuff that wasn't so good. And my dad was a pretty calm person, but my mum wasn't. And so there was a fair bit of arguing in there, in the relationship. Because I don't remember my dad ever yelling at me or and call him yelling at any of the kids. And that's kind of underlying where I was at. But certainly there was arguments, and then you got pushed to a point, and then it was like arguing back. And I didn't know this, but apparently kids often take that on and as blame for themselves. Yeah, you're nodding.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so I had this whole thing where this was my fault that I,
Mm.
from a young age, because and um, and it was when I accepted it, it was easy to resolve. But until I accepted it, I carried that for a lot, and I found I would. There was two things. I would date people that behaved in that similar, and I want to be careful how I say it because my mum's a really lovely woman that cares a lot about, and she went to great lengths to look after her children and things like that.
Mhm.
But I think back then she was quite insecure and a bit controlling,
Mm.
um, and that's kind of who I started going out with.
Mm.
And similar sort of thing. And I didn't realize this until I was getting some help with that, which happened to be someone that a partner that I was with recommended. I'll go and see this person, and that person
Mm.
points out and does this little exercise, and without saying it overtly, said the person you're dating is really, really controlling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was ironic because that person had recommended me to go and see this person.
Yeah.
uh, and that's where that relationship started to fall apart.
Yes.
But it was
Got
it
it.
was interesting from that side of things that one, I noticed there was a pattern of behavior I'd go at with people that were controlling, and I would assume that it was my fault. And not
Mm.
to say that I didn't do anything wrong, because I certainly could. There's areas when I've always worked to improve how I communicate. But then on top of that, I noticed some other times when I was dating someone that was really nice, not that type of character. I wasn't, and when I was there and they were lovely, and I go, but there's something missing. Um,
Yeah.
and it was, because how you hear about the person who always dates and usually it's a woman who was dating the bad guy. But I was
Yeah.
in that category where it was like I was with these really lovely, lovely women when I was dating, but I'd be just going, there's something not right, and it's like not real, and it was completely peaceful, calm. There was lots of
Yeah.
passion. Intimacy was wonderful, but it was just I felt there's something missing. And it wasn't until I resolved that all of a sudden that dynamic changed, and then I saw it like almost immediately when I met the person. Went, that's that behavior. No, sorry, thank you. That
Yeah.
personality is not something I will accept in my life because I wouldn't accept that for me. But it
Yeah.
was all in that self worth, and I think a lot of it came from because I'm a big fan of Wayne Dyer, and his book, How to Be a No Limit Person. He talks about you have to have a quiet love affair with yourself. That's not going around I love me, and all that kind of stuff. But
Right.
you have to, as a person inside, and that's where I talk about now. Because this was a long time ago that happened. I really talk about separating the behavior from the person. You have to really love who you are. You might do things that mess up, and we all do. But that's not who you are.
Yeah.
That's a behavior that you can address and deal with that, and you shouldn't feel guilty about it. Just fix it.
Right.
It's feeling guilty about it gives you to drag it around. If you just let it go, and it's easier. Well, that's my experience since I've become aware of that. But it was just finding that love of yourself and going, hey, having that. I love how he termed that. Have a quiet love affair with yourself. That you're an awesome person. Because now I do. I think I'm freaking awesome. I think
Yeah.
I don't do everything great. I mess things up,
Right.
but as a
Right.
person, I'm a good person. And as a result of that, it really changed the dynamic of the people that I even unconsciously attract. Because now it's rare that I'll come across a person, and maybe I'm projecting, that is that I won't be able to have a good relationship with.
Yeah.
And so, but and that's why I was when we're talking about love and relationships and all that shit. All that shit component is what you bring to it. I think where you're going, okay. For me, it was I'm bringing this me. I'm not liking me, devaluing me, and as a result, I'm projecting onto this person. Well, one, I'm allowing some people that I'm allowing behaviors that I
Mhm.
wouldn't do, that weren't good for me, and two, uh, um, I was projecting things too that maybe weren't there, and
Mhm.
then reacting, which was resulted in a reaction from them,
Mhm.
and then when I let all that go, it was, I said, the whole dynamic changed. So
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I think what I'm hearing you talk about is something that I think we all struggle with, which is our comfort zones. And just because something's comfortable doesn't mean that it's good for us. It
Mm,
just means that we are familiar with the feeling. So you
yeah,
were familiar and
yeah.
comfortable with
Mm,
the feeling of the victim, it's my fault,
hmm.
and this controlling, anxious,
Mm.
um, person, like energy and personality in your life.
Well, to give a
So that,
practical example, it was like
yeah.
in one relationship, it was like you're always yelling, and I was talking my normal tone of voice, and
Mm,
I was asked other friends, "Do I yell all the time?" And they go, "No," and I said, "Oh, okay." Anyway, so I went. I said, and which was good. I lowered the tone of my voice, and I learned how to do that. But that was a constant
mhm.
thing. I'd like something would come up, and I'd change, and I found in one long-term relationship, I changed so far from who I was, it
Mm,
made it really, because I wasn't me anymore. I was this other
yeah.
person, and then arguments were starting because I'm behaving in a way that is not congruent with who I am. Um, Lowering my voice is good. It become really an attractive quality in later in life when I
Me
when
too.
I was
I've learned
whole.
to do that.
You know, there's
Yeah.
like the amount of women going, "You have such a wonderful tone of voice," and it's like, "Oh, thank you."
Yeah. No, but listen, I mean, what it's so interesting that you bring that up because you know what we're talking about is growth.
Mm,
Changing yourself and shifting yourself into some mold or person that you think the other person wants to be, or to do it in
mm,
such a way that the other person isn't triggered. Let's say this happens a
mm,
lot in abusive relationships where the one person starts to like walk on eggshells and change
mm.
themselves so much that they don't trigger the other person, right? That's not.
That was my life in two
Yeah.
long-term relationships. Like, walking on it, it was like floating above them.
Yeah,
That's how bad it was.
exactly. So that's, you know, that creates problems, right? Because
Mm,
you're denying you're denying who you are. But learning to grow and change is a good thing. I come from a pretty large family. Like I'm
mm,
the oldest of four. I
yeah,
just turned 47
mm,
on February 12th. So I don't know when this will release, but you know, as
yeah.
of time of recording, it was like last week.
Happy birthday.
And thank you. And my youngest sister
Mm,
will turn 43 in June, and there are four of us.
yeah, that's a short
So
period
like
of time.
it's me and then 18 months my sister, then 22 months later it's my brother, and then 18 months later it's my sister. So there are four of us in like 4.5 years.
That was a
It's crazy.
cold snap in that period of time, I'm gathering.
Yeah. My parents joke that like, hey, they were 19 when they had me. So they're like, hey, we couldn't afford cable. And I'm like, yeah, there are other things to do though, but okay. And then my mom will also say, yeah, but your dad was so hot. And I'm like, ooh, excited for you guys. So happy. Don't need the details. Okay. Like don't need the details. But so I say that to say that in our family, the louder you talked,
Mm,
you had to talk louder and louder. You had to be the loudest to be heard, I think
yeah,
better
okay.
said.
Yeah, yeah.
And also being the oldest and that many kids like so close together and stuff, I have a very strong energy, and I can get, and when I get passionate, I get loud and I get excited and my body language, and for some people that can be really intense and really overwhelming. So
Mm,
me learning how to use that like a dial to
yeah,
turn it down and turn it up, read the room so to speak,
yeah.
so that I can be understood and heard in a way that lands for the other person is something that I've worked really hard on, going to your point of being able
Mm,
to like monitor your voice. That doesn't mean that I don't feel that I am putting on a mask or I'm changing myself. What I'm
yeah.
doing is understanding who I am and my tendency to get intense
Mm,
and monitor that given the situation, because going full throttle
yeah.
doesn't serve the purpose or my intention, which is like to be understood and to, you know, be part of the conversation, not just bulldoze over everyone because I'm just have this mm, reaction, this
Mm,
reflex to be the loudest and the most intense.
yeah.
Right. So I think it kind of circles back to that awareness. The other thing that you talked about that I was thinking of was this like over responsibility that so many of us have for someone else's
Yeah.
feelings.
Yeah.
Right. So like I can be compassionate to my partner, to my husband.
Yeah.
And care about how he's feeling and ask him the questions, but ultimately it's not my job to fix him. It's my job as his partner to hold space, to love him, to ask questions, to get curious. But in the end, like it's his job to do the work that he needs to do to be the person he wants to be. And I can help with that sometimes. I can be of assistance and say, hey, for example, does this example work? Well, I'm going to say it. We'll say it. We'll see if it fits. When we first started dating, he's Dutch, I'm American, and they're different words, as we discussed in the beginning with Celsius and Fahrenheit. Different words have different impact.
Yeah.
Right? So in America, when you say fuck you, those are fighting words. We're gonna fight. Like, how dare you? Right?
Yeah.
But here in the Netherlands, and I think also in like the UK and in Europe, like, oh fuck you is just like
whatever.
Come on. Whatever. Oh, whatever.
Yeah.
Right? So my husband and I, when we first were dating, we were talking about something. I don't remember at all what it was, but he goes, "Oh, fuck you." And I said, "No, we weren't fighting. We were, I don't know. I was telling him a story or I don't even remember, but I do know we were not fighting." And he says that. And I go, "No, that is something that I will not accept. I don't care if you're joking. I don't care if it's funny. We do not say that to each other."
Yeah.
Because if we allow ourselves to say it to one another when we're joking and goofing around, it's a slippery slope to saying it to each other when we're angry. And that I will not have. I will not be in a relationship where we say, shut up, where we say, fuck you, or you're an asshole. I will not be in a relationship where we call names. We can absolutely disagree. We can have debates and arguments, but we will always do it with respect for each other. And if we don't do it, we have to start with when we're happy and loving each other and joking around. So like, oh, shut up. That's not true. Really? That happened? No, we don't say that to each other because it just cracks the door so that when you're mad, you just kick that open and then now you're in a whole world of hurt. And I didn't grow up that way. Like I never in my 47 years have heard my parents tell each other to shut up. Never. Yeah. It's just like, yeah.
I was going to say, doesn't that fall under setting boundaries as to what's right for you? And that doesn't mean the other person has to do that, but in sense of you go, well, okay, without being controlled, because you go, this is what's right for me, and they have a choice then, either
totally.
It's up to that, but you need to, and so because this is part of growth. That's like with me lowering my voice. It was, and I'm grateful for that experience, and I don't see that as changing me who as a person. That's a behavior. So totally. I was like, how do I? Because you mentioned in that same environment, because it's a similar sort of thing. I can get very excited as well, and for me, it was a good way to learn how to calm down and control, and be and better read the situation. And I relay that to another, because I used to have that same sort of thing, because I was dating a similar sort of person, where there was the needy type of thing, where if you hadn't called or whatever, and I remember there was one time someone, and so I was busy, I was tired, I'd done something, and they go, oh, you haven't called, where are you, and why don't you come and and I was like, oh, all right. So I jumped in the car and went over there and tried to then reconcile the anger. Spent time doing that. And then I realized that that's not a behavior that I want. I'm not interested in, if you've got a problem, we can, for me, you need to talk about it. And I had a similar sort of experience where I was with someone and they were busy doing whatever they're doing. I was at their house and doing whatever, I can't remember whatever it was they were doing. And but I was waiting, time to go to bed sort of thing. But so I was waiting in bed and had my computer and I'm working on my computer, blah, 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 doing that. And they finished, I think it was about 45 minutes I was waiting, which I wasn't fussed about. You need to do your stuff. Right. I'll do my work, no problem.
Right.
And then they've come to bed and sort of snuggled up. And to credit, I probably should have said, I'll just be a couple of minutes because I've got to finish up, but I didn't do that. I was just went, I acknowledged, but I didn't say how long it'd be. They then cracked a poo because I didn't immediately stop what I was doing and left and went to the other bedroom and went to sleep there. And so my first thing was to go, no, actually, I wouldn't have in the past a while ago, I would have gone and chased them and gone, what's wrong? And try and said, no, that behavior is not. If you've got a problem, talk about it.
Use your words.
Exactly, and we'll talk about it. So I just finished what I was doing, went to sleep, and so left. Next morning, wake up.
I was going to say, how did that go? Next morning.
Next morning, I just said, and so what? And it was. And I said, this is, I will listen to you and have the conversation. If you're upset, if there's something you need, no problem. And granted, I'll take it on board. You came here and I did acknowledge you, but I didn't say I'll only be a couple of minutes. And I'll take that on board. I offered that, but I won't be chasing you. If you've got to have a poopy and you disappear and want me to chase you to then try and resolve it. If you've got a problem, then bring it up. And yeah, it actually, the discussion went well. So.
Yeah, good. I mean, I think, that's precisely how we grow and communicate in relationships, right? Because like you owned your part of that. It's never always just one person's fault.
Yeah.
Right. You owned your part of that. Now,
and I didn't say you. I didn't say, how dare you go out? How dare you get mad at me or whatever? It was like, I said, if you have a problem with me, I did say you, but I said, if there's an issue with my behavior, you tell me, but I'm not chasing you. That's my boundary. I'm not chasing you. And, and like you were saying with the fuck you sort of thing, it's like, that's a boundary. And if you don't want to do that, then, we might need to consider that this is not the right thing. And because I wonder how much more harmonious relationships would be if we were, again, knowing ourselves, if we knew ourselves and were clear about what our boundaries are and just went, okay, sorry, but that's not going to work. There's another, if you're, whether you're straight or gay, there's 3.5 billion people on the planet roughly available, and if you buy, there's 7 million.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's someone else that's compatible. You're compatible with.
Yeah, but we just live in this. I think we as humans just live in this. We're incredibly impatient. And I think technology in the modern world has made us incredibly impatient and making us more and more impatient. I mean, when we were kids, if I wanted to find out information, I had to pull the Encyclopedia Britannica or go to the library and do a Dewey Decimal System with the card and then go find the thing. I mean, yet kids listening to this podcast are like, what is she talking about? Dewey Decimal. And they're going to jump on Google. And then if it doesn't, if it doesn't come right away, oh, this stupid phone, this piece of shit, the blah, 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 So I think in relationships, we've become, just as humans, we've become incredibly impatient. And we somehow have adopted this scarcity mindset that there's just like not enough to go around. So you're absolutely correct. I mean, there's 7 billion people on the planet. If this one person in your hometown is not the right fit for you, you don't need to change who you are. Maybe you need to change towns. I don't know. And I get it. That's like easier said than done, right? But it is possible to do. My husband is Dutch. I am American. He was living in the Netherlands full-time. I was living in Salt Lake City full-time. We worked for the same international company, and we met at a sales conference in Salt Lake City, Utah, because the company we worked for is based in Salt Lake.
Mm.
We met at the conference. We started talking. We hit it off. Then it was over chat. Then it was started with FaceTime, and it grew and grew until like the next sales conference. Then we had this whole relationship.
Yeah.
So thank God for technology in that way. But I bring that up to say we literally lived on the other sides of the world.
Mm.
And yet we found one another. And I am the happiest I've ever been. I am in the healthiest relationship I've ever been.
Mm.
I'm with the most supportive man I've ever been with. Neither of us are perfect. We fuck it up all the time, but we also have a take two rule, which is, and sometimes it happens immediately. Sometimes it happens days later, where I say, hey, can I get a take two on that happened? I've had some time to think about it. And the way I said it, or what I said, or what I did, that was not okay. I see how it affected you. That wasn't my intention to affect you in that way. I apologize. What I would like to say, or how I wish that had gone, is this, right? I mean, think about movies. Rarely is a scene done in one take.
Yeah, true.
They do the scene and then they're like, why don't we try you standing here, you standing there, a little more emotion, a little less emotion, a little this, until they get the scene perfect. And I think we can adopt that same mindset, where we can say, hey, can I get a take two with that? Because I wanted that to go differently. And I realize now that I've had time to think that because I did X, Y, Z, I think it set those dominoes in motion, and then this happened, right? So I'd like to say it this way, or do it this way, or whatever. And that's been huge for us.
I love the take two. I haven't heard that before. You need to write a book on that.
Well, I actually think I've stolen it, or a version, or I've changed it slightly, but I think I first heard something along those lines from Brené Brown, if I'm correct. But anyways, yeah, I'll do some version of it in a book.
there's no new ideas anyway. It's just your version of it. But I love the take two. But again, you keep coming back to the intention. And that seems really critical, and what's given you a solid foundation to your relationship is, I'm sure there's many things, but it seems, because you've referenced it a couple of times, this being aware of the intention. You both, and it sounds like you had set that up from the start, that it was your intention to be loving and kind and considerate to each other, and you set boundaries. You were very clear about, that's not a thing that you accept. And I'm sure your husband's done a similar sort of thing to you nodding. Okay. But and I just wonder about it from the perspective, because I do think, a lot of things in life are fairly simple. There's simple principles. If we follow them, we have a lot less drama and angst and problems. And it sounds like, one, being very clear about who it is you are, one, liking yourself, and being clear about who you are and what's right and what's not right. And then from that, being confident enough to communicate what's right and not right for you to the other person, including a take two, getting a do-over. I mean, that in itself, I think, would make a lot of relationships really happy. Just those two things.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it on the head, which is like life. I think life and having good relationships, not only with yourself, but with other people, is pretty simple. But simple is not easy.
Yeah.
Right? They are different things, right? The being kind and respectful and knowing yourself and, setting your boundaries, simple concepts to understand. Not easy to do, though. Right? Because it requires us to, as you said, know ourselves and quietly love ourselves. It requires us sometimes to set our pride aside. It requires us to admit when we've fucked it up. And we will. One of the things I always say is being imperfect is the perfect way to be. And it's not an excuse for shitty behavior, but it's permission to try knowing that you might fuck it up sometimes and allowing yourself to get a take two, to do it over, to say, boy, I did not do that well. And I'm sorry. And can I get another chance? Now, sometimes you wear out your sorries, right? Like there's this, where's that? You got to figure out that where's the cry wolf line, right? Where you're just like, listen, I have heard you've apologized for, you've got like, we're on take. I think, sorry, this is my ADD, I guess, coming in here, but I think the world record, going back to take twos in movies, I think the world record for the most takes to do any scene is the baseball bat scene in The Shining, where Shirley, I forget her last name. I think it was 127 takes to do that one scene. And I think that still to this day holds the world record, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So you and your partner or you yourself get to decide how many takes do I get before this behavior is a problem for myself or is a problem in my relationship. And now either we're not compatible, right? Like that's it. Like, okay, I'm on take 127 of this. Is this a me problem? Or like, this is something in myself that I want to change? Or is this a you problem and we're just not compatible? Not that it's a problem that either of us are wrong, but is this just maybe a boundary that doesn't work for you and therefore we're not compatible? And that's I think something that's a little tricky to separate, right? Is this a me or a you?
Yeah.
And every individual and partnership needs to decide that for themselves.
I guess it would be the level of angst that it causes you. I mean, and I'm putting aside things like, family violence and stuff like that in this. That's a separate issue to,
exactly.
And certainly not something you should ever tolerate. So if that's there, just walk away. It's something I learned the hard way too. There are people that are aggressive out there, just stay away from it. When as soon as you get that, it's like I got a saucepan of spaghetti tipped on my head once, and that they checked was not too hot before they did it. So it wasn't like it was a passion thing. It was like thought about it and checked it and then did it.
Premeditated spaghetti dumping. That's exactly. The worst kind. The premeditation.
So, but from that, where was I going with that? It's this draw, having what's right for you, and going, okay, is that, because we want to set that up. Like you say, how many takes do you need to go through? If the person, that's what I was going with the sorry side of things. If someone's saying sorry and then goes and repeats it and then says sorry and goes and repeats it and sorry and goes and repeats it, I think that's pretty clear. One, there's an acknowledgement there's an issue, or lying that they're going to do something about it, one of the two. Right. Either way, it's a problem. And if they keep repeating it and saying sorry, well then really there's a deeper issue that needs to be resolved for them to work. And that's probably where you have to decide how long you want to be in that, because they might might never do it. And as I think we've talked about it, where when you first meet, that's the best you're going to get. After that, there can be, because we all put on that wonderful thing at the start, and then you learn that this person, they do make noises when they brush their teeth, and they do all these little things. That they are human, and so it's like if you're being irked at the start of the relationship, you probably need to look at how much of that's going to start playing on your mind later in the relationship. But then, I mean, from that side of things too, is it and because I've thought about that a lot, was because a lot of my friends and your mum and dad sound like they would be similar in that regard, is their core connection, and their connection is more about the character and the person, who that person is, as opposed to say physical attributes or things like that. I mean, I'm sure that they find each other the most beautiful on the planet, which is that's what you should do, regardless of what anyone else thinks. I think that's something I learned the wrong way. But from that perspective, it's loving that person for who they are, as they are. Because where I was going with that was friends that are in long-term relationships. When I talked to them about what they did when they were meeting that person, they all described character traits. I was looking for this character trait. I was looking. This is not. I wanted someone who was an academic or whatever. It was what was the character of the person, and that was the connection that they connected on, and from that they see the most beautiful person on the planet, whether they're a Hollywood model or not. They see the most beautiful person because they connected on the character of the person. So what's your take on that? Is that when you're starting to meet someone, what are the features do you think that you look for, or how do you decide on what's the right person for you? What should you be looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to knowing yourself. So, I mean, I know what mine is personally, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But I think just for the listeners, it's like it really goes back to this awareness and what do I really like? What is it that I want? What characteristics am I do I personally want? And really getting clear on that. The other thing I think that was coming up for me is this, like, I also have had friends who have a very clear list of what they're looking for. Like, I had a girlfriend, I have a girlfriend, but this was years ago that she was single, and she had this very clear list of like, I will not date anyone who is not old. I only want to date men that are 10 years older than me or older. Yeah. That was like, so, if she's 40, 50 or older is who she's going to date. And she won't even, like, she'll just swipe left on someone who's 48.
Yeah.
And I was like, that seems pretty, why, I asked her why, and she was like, well, because men tend to be immature. And so older men tend to be more mature. I want them to be established in six. I agree. I want them to be established.
It doesn't matter how old we are. We're still immature.
I think, well, I was going to say, I think men, but I think just humans tend to digress to the lowest age in the room. So if like the youngest person in the room is 12, we all turn into 12-year-olds and start telling fart jokes and stuff, which I'm all for. But yeah, so she just was, she had these very, what in my mind, because when we became friends, I was in the middle of marriage number 2. And he was a little younger than me, and I was far more financially successful than him. But I felt whole and happy in myself. And so I was like, well, I want him to be around because he's fun and exciting and, had a whole lot of qualities. Because I had been such a young mom, I didn't really get to do my like 20s college years.
Yeah.
Now here I am in my 30s, and my son's basically grown, and I have this really successful 6-figure job and all of this. So now I sort of had this partner that allowed me and helped me sort of have my college years, which was super fun and needed it. And I was looking for that. I wanted that at the time.
Yeah.
We grew out of that, which is why one of the reasons why we're no longer together. But so she had this really clear laundry list, checklist of things that someone she dated had to have. And I remember having a discussion with her saying, like, do you think that you're limiting yourself? Because maybe someone really fantastic ticks 9 of these 10 boxes.
Everything.
But he has this whole other intangible kindness and willingness to learn and caring and observant and aware and like all of these other things that this list is not encompassing, or at least not that you've written down, right? So I think there's this balance to be like, perfect isn't a thing. Like I said, being imperfect is the perfect way to be, and perfect isn't a thing. My parents have a wonderful marriage relationship that they have held together for over 50 years. And yes, there are things my mom does that irritates the shit out of my dad. And there are things that my father does that just drives my mother up the fucking wall.
Yeah.
But they don't bicker and fight about it. They continue to talk about it, or they've just accepted. Like my mom has, you know, I don't know if this is actually one of the things, but just as an example, my mom has just accepted that my dad, when he's done with the dish, sets it on the counter above the dishwasher instead of putting it in.
Yeah.
She's tried for 30 years to get him to change that behavior. He just hasn't. So she's like, whatever, fuck it, just put the bowl in and let it go.
Yeah.
You know, my mom comes home from her end of her work day and my dad works from home. She's a school teacher. She comes home. My dad's like, ooh, okay, let's go do something. My mom wants to like, I don't want to say a word. I've been on all day. I want to lay on the bed and just like mindlessly scroll on my phone, where my dad is just like, he's tried to change that in her.
Yeah.
Not happening. So he's just like, calls me instead. Hey, you want to go for a walk? Hey, let's go hit some balls at the golf course while mom winds down. Okay, let's do that. Right. So
yeah,
there's also this, like, you need to decide for yourself where the give and take is and what is a non-negotiable and what is something that, because perfect isn't a thing. It just is not a thing. And no, you're not perfect. I'm not perfect. We're not perfect in relationship together. Sometimes we'll go for these long stretches where it's all great. And then someone will trip up or the moon will be in retrograde or God knows what. And then like shit gets a little rocky and you figure it out, you know? And again, like, I'm glad that you brought up like abusive relationships, because that's a whole nother subject, kind of not what we're
yeah, exactly. And it is you know, I think we both have experience there, but it's a different topic. And yeah, because I'm just like wondering where you draw the line. Yeah, and I guess it's probably not something we can answer because it's a personal thing. Because I know from my perspective, you know, there's things where I think I drew the line in the wrong spots. And also too, as I mentioned, I was attracting the wrong type of people to start with, so that's not going to help. So I needed to be whole first before I could actually have a whole relationship. I like that term. I just made that up, I think. Unless I stole it from somewhere else subconsciously.
There's your book. The whole relationship. Not the relationship whole.
Exactly.
Stay out of the relationship hole with a whole relationship.
Exactly. That's how you fix your relationship hole, by having a whole relationship.
Exactly. That's the title of our podcast.
I love that. But it is I think there's that, like you say, you've got to draw the line as to, you know, things that are just not really worth it. I mean, and because sometimes too, you go, because I can imagine your dad's behavior. We talk about the dish thing. And I imagine that was there at the very beginning. You know, I'm imagining, yeah. And because an example is that, you know, I've seen it. I have and seen it referenced a number of times. And I used to smoke. I'm not a smoker, but where people say, "Oh, I don't like, you know, that my partner smokes," and I was like, well, you know, did they smoke when you met? And I said, yeah. And it's like, well,
yeah. Yeah, well, and I think also too, I think what
that's
you're
what I want.
up,
What's that?
Is that sometimes perhaps the dish was there in the beginning, but maybe not. Maybe honestly, my mom in some ways contributed and created that behavior. And I'll just speak for myself, right? So when my husband and I got together, he was a bachelor living on his own. So he was living on his own. So he did his own laundry. He ironed his own clothes. He cooked his own meal. If he put the dish on the counter, no one was coming to put it in the dishwasher for him. He had to do all of that. And then we get together and I move from the United States to the Netherlands and move into his apartment and start I quit my job that we met each other at, and I moved to the Netherlands and start my coaching business full time. So now I'm working from home. So now I'm staying on top of the laundry because I'm there. I'm making dinner so that when he walks in the door at 7:30, dinner's ready so that we're eating at a decent hour and not 9 o'clock at night. Also, I'm there at the house. I'm starting a new business, which he's supporting financially. So I feel a bit of like, okay, I can't contribute financially to the household, but I can do my share by doing some of these kinds of things. And in the beginning, he was like, I feel weird. I feel guilty that like I come home and like all of this stuff is done. This isn't like, I feel weird, right? He was like shifting out of his routine and his comfort zone. Well, now we're in the process, as we record this podcast, of moving back to the United States. And he has a new job that's bringing him there. And I'm talking to you from the Netherlands still, but he has been in the US for almost 3 weeks now in our new apartment there. So we're sort of like back to square one, if you will, but flip-flop sides of the world, which is sort of bizarre. So he said to me yesterday when we were talking, he's putting in laundry and he's like, this is so weird. I'm like doing laundry again and all the dishes and like cooking for myself and meal planning. Like it feels so weird. And I was like, yeah, you're sort of back to where we were in the beginning. So I had somewhat, I won't say like created a monster, but me coming into the relationship shift that dynamic where there sort of just became this routine, perhaps maybe expectation that like I'm taking care of the laundry and that. So is it fair for me to get then irritated that he never does the laundry?
Yeah.
Without saying, hey, I know that we've got this routine of me doing the laundry, but my business is picking up now where I am going to be out of the house more than I have before. So can we split these roles a bit again? Like, do we do it days? Do we hire someone? Like how do we want to handle this? Because I don't want to get irritated at you that now I'm also working outside of the house, yet these responsibilities are still falling on me. For me to get pissed off at him and you do the laundry and help out, that's not fair.
Yeah.
Because we created that together. And so if it needs to change, I need to discuss that with him. Right.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That communication is really important. I love that analogy that you say you created a new dynamic that then became the norm. I hate that word norm, sorry. But it became
what we were comfortable with, right?
Yeah, well, exactly.
I mean, it did become normal. It came to be what we expected, right? Which I think that's what's normal. Yeah.
It became your behaviors. Is exactly. Yeah. Anyway. That's just
another topic.
One of those words that just irritates the way people use that word. Anyway, it's a longer story. But what I was looking at, but I like because that analogy that fits that dynamic as well. It's either you started a relationship, the person had the behavior. Now you're 10 years in and you're going, I don't like that behavior, but it was there at the beginning, and that's
right.
Because I'm wondering, because what we're talking about here, well, for me, was where we're drawing the line. Where do we draw the line? And maybe is it something where you project out and go, well, in 10 years' time, is that behavior going to piss me off? Because if we're talking about things that are, not. Again, putting the family violence thing aside or abusive behaviors,
right.
put that aside. The things that is it going to irk me in 10 years' time that the toothpaste is this way? Because if you bring it up a few times, you have this, you're starting to see each other, that it happens, you bring up, say, I don't like the toothpaste like that, and go, yeah, well, I do. Let's just keep it short like that. Whatever the discussion is, but you don't like it, they like it. And then someone's got to decide, okay, is that going to bother me? Or both going to decide it's going to bother me. 10 years time, because I'm trying to work out where do we work this line out as to what's acceptable. Because it's interesting as you were talking about your relationship there with the dude. Because I coming back to my mum. My mum was kind of anally retentive when I was growing up, and our bedroom had to be immaculate. Before I went to the army, I could make my bed army style, 45 degree sheets folded completely straight. Wow. Had to make that every morning. Socks were stacked in the sock thing neatly, underwear folded properly, and I did all that as well. So my mum, which I think was a great thing, the fact that I, as a guy, was an early age doing part of the housework and did the dishes and all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that would cause a problem in a relationship, because I've been in and it's wasn't just one, but a couple of relationships I've been where I'm just doing. I'll cook. I was trained as a cook, so I can cook. I'm happy to do the washing. I do all that and just get it done. And then they're going, I got in trouble because it's like, I've got nothing to do in this relationship, was the comment I got. And I was like, well, we cuddle and we really cuddle and we go for walks together and stuff like that. What else do we need? The fact that you're not having to do dishes and washing and stuff like that, what's the issue?
Well, I think that goes back to what I said of that kind of a version of like what I say is about me and what you hear is about you. So here these women, because you are heterosexual, identify as heterosexual. So these women had not only probably most likely, given our age, seen their mothers be the homemakers.
Yeah.
So they had an example of what the woman's role in the home was. And then frankly, we as women are taught that that's our role.
Yeah.
So that then when we get into relationship and we have a man like yourself and frankly like my husband, where they have been taught to do those things and they frankly enjoy those things and honestly sometimes do some of those things better than I do. My husband can iron a shirt far better than I can. So I actually ask him, will you iron my shirt, please? Because he's better at it than I am, right? And I don't like doing it anyway. So, so it works out. But, I think that kind of like circles back to this awareness of like, what is she making it mean about herself and her self-worth? When you are taking care of the household because you're good at it, because you enjoy it, because you've been trained in it, both by your mother and apparently as, like in school as a chef and things like that. And so I think if you're finding
army as well, because I could iron a shirt pretty well too. So
in the army as well. So, but I find, to answer your question for me personally, I think when I find myself feeling guilty about like, but you're doing everything in the house and I feel bad that I'm not contributing. If I find myself feeling irritated that he's doing something that I feel like is my task or like sits in my column, or I start feeling like I'm worthless because of what is or isn't happening in our relationship or in our household, that's the first sign for me to be like, okay, time out. What's going on? Why? Unpack it for myself, get curious for myself first. Why am I feeling this way? Oh, because as a woman, if I'm not cooking and cleaning and keeping the house just so, and being at the door with a fresh cocktail and my makeup on for my husband when he walks in the door, I'm not being a good woman. Okay, hi, it is not the fucking 1950s. And like, oh, so that's some programming and some baggage that's just been given to me.
Yeah.
That's not mine. Another analogy that I talk about a lot with my clients is this idea that like we're all born with a basket. You could think of Dorothy or whatever, but we're all born with a basket. And as we go through life, people just put shit in our basket. Yeah. And sometimes our basket gets real heavy and we're like, damn, this thing is, what is in here?
Yeah.
And we set the basket down and we start to pull the things out and look at it and be like, I didn't put this in here. I hate spam. Why is spam in here? No, I'm leaving that. I'm setting that aside, right? No. Or like, ooh,
thanks for the
Manchego
Oreos.
cheese. I love Manchego cheese. That can definitely go back in there, right? Or like,
yeah.
Still, it's kind of a silly analogy, but I think, that's kind of one of those things where like, oh, that picture of the 1950s household, that was put in my basket and I don't want to carry that anymore. That's not mine. And I don't want it. I don't like, so I'm going to set it aside. And sometimes it's that easy to just be like, okay, done with that. Other times it takes like therapy and coaching and working through, because sometimes setting that aside then now leaves a hole in me. So what do I fill that hole? What do I like? I've taken that puzzle piece out. Now what's the new piece I'm going to put back in to complete myself? That's not anything to do with my husband. Is that, how do I find my worth in some other way that has nothing to do with how I'm taking care of the household? I think that's why so many women in particular, when we find ourselves divorced, when the empty nesters, right? Like so many women the kids move away and find themselves like, oh gosh, I actually don't know who you are. And I also don't think I like you very much. And
yes,
find themselves divorced or the kids move away and they don't get divorced, but with the kids gone, now this identity of this role of like mom is gone and they have no idea who they are. Because they haven't spent time figuring out like, who is Karey? Yes, I'm a mother. Yes, I'm a wife. Yes, I'm a sister. Yes, I'm a daughter, but I'm also a human being who is me by myself. And who is that?
Yeah.
What is that person like? And who does that person want to be when I step into the role of wife, mother, daughter? sister.
Is it still about setting that one, being aware of who you are in those different spaces, and then setting the boundaries as to what you need as well, and in each of those spaces? Because I can imagine, like your mum does. I love what you're talking about your mum, where she comes home and she goes, "I just need to lay down on the bed, scroll my thing. That's my thing," and she does that. She's obviously identified that's what she needs, and your dad's, as much as he sounds like he's got the energy, he's like, okay, I better give her some space and give that. So it's finding that balance. But I think it only happened because your mum insisted that that's what she needed for herself, to address her day. Because if she had responded to your dad, it sounds like he had a lot of energy there as well, and just gone, okay, do that, then she's might be heading down a path where she's not getting what she needs. So how do we, from that side of things, how do you balance it? Is it just having the courage to say, this is what I need? And I guess from your parents' relationship too, because they've been together for a long time, they understand what each other needs. And is it something you probably need to establish at the start of a relationship? Again, coming back to, where do we draw that line? Is this something that's going to piss me off later on?
Yeah, I think yes. I think the answer to all of those questions is like yes. It's yes and it's both and, right? So I do think that, well, I think another thing I say all the time is like, shitty shit happens and it's got nothing to do with you, which it means to say that like we're always doing the best we can with the tools and information we have, right? So we meet, you and I start to be in relationship, and we're coming into that relationship as whole and healthy as we are in that moment in time. So with those tools and that information and that self-awareness that I have in that moment, I might say, listen, Damien, you're real cute, real fun. I enjoy talking to you, but smoking is a non-negotiable for me. It's like, that's it, right? Non-negotiable. So this has been a fun date. Frankly, for me, I wouldn't even go on a first date if you were a smoker. Like that for me is just a non-negotiable, right? But just as an example. So you set those boundaries up front, but I think it goes back to knowing yourself as best you can in the moment, understanding what your non-negotiables and your boundaries are, and communicating those to your partner, and having the courage and the confidence to leave if those aren't being met, but also the courage and the confidence to know that your boundaries can change and shift as you change and shift. And the courage and confidence to let your partner's boundaries change and shift as they change and shift.
Yeah.
Right? Like what was a boundary for me before might not be a boundary anymore, because I've healed that part of me. So I don't have to put this like hard line to protect my heart. I've healed that part. Now I'm stronger. I know myself more. I can shift that boundary a bit because I now have the tools to manage it, stop it sooner. It's no longer a trigger point for me. That can happen. And I think we need to allow ourselves the space and grace to change and evolve and shift. And we need to allow our partners the same. And one thing that really happened, one of the other reasons why marriage number 2 for me blew up was because I was changing and shifting all of the time. And he wasn't. And he felt very threatened by my changing and shifting all of the time. So we started to just grow further and further apart, which allowed loads of other things, which is again another episode, but lots of other things to happen in our relationship, which ultimately blew it up.
Yeah. I like what you're saying. Sorry, go ahead.
No.
I was going to change the topic. So, okay.
Oh, do.
As you were talking that, I was thinking about, I'm thinking about this at the start of the relationship, and we seem to, well, maybe that's where I'm directing it, but those things are coming up for me. And I was thinking, again, from my side of things, because I really, and probably haven't talked about this much anyway, but I used to, at the start of relationships, and this is about knowing yourself and being yourself, and we mentioned scarcity, and I think that's why that come out. I have this scarcity mentality, which, I have the complete opposite now. But yeah, when I was younger, for whatever reason, I used to have that scarcity mentality, which was weird because I'd date someone and then try to impress them, and be this person and be this extra, put all this extra stuff in that wasn't really me, just to be impressive. And then, it either ended because they weren't interested, or I got bored with it after a while and realized that it wasn't what I wanted. This person wasn't what I wanted, even though I was going to all this effort to try and make it. And that's where I wonder about the scarcity, because I kept repeating it. I facetiously refer to myself as a serial monogamist. I just went from one relationship to the other. So it wasn't like there was a shortage, but it was so. And I wondered, from that perspective, now when I look back and go, well, really, if I could do it, which I don't think, doing again, but just the advice to myself would be just be you. And if that person doesn't fit, that's okay. Don't try and make something work. Don't try and make it work. Just be you. If it doesn't work, that's okay. There's another person. There's like, as we were saying before, there's 7-something billion people on the planet. And very few people live in these tiny little towns. And even with the internet now, you can still meet people.
Totally.
And it was just funny. It was like, when I think back about that, going, I tried so hard to be a likable person when I already was. And it was and I mean, I was and I think everybody is. When you just be yourself, you're an interesting person. And I just find it fascinating that, when I look back and go, I did that. Whereas now it's like I'm a completely different person, that I'm looking at a completely different person going, who was that? Who was that person? There's some...
I mean, it's such a simple concept that you're talking about. Like, just do you. It's another thing I say to my clients all the time. And it's along the lines of, like, if you can't be happy, how in the hell is anyone else around you going to be happy?
Yeah.
Like, it's your job to make yourself happy. It's not anyone else's job to make you happy. But just doing you is simple, but it is not freaking easy. From the moment we are children, boys don't cry. Boys don't wear dresses. Boys don't play with Barbie dolls. Boys don't wear pink. Girls don't be bossy. You're bossy on the playground. Girls should be kind. Girls, what is it? Girls are sweet and boys are...
Sugar and spice and everything nice.
Sugar and spice and everything nice. All of that business.
Boys are puppy dog tails and something.
Exactly. And snails or something like that. And it's just like, all of that business. So from the moment we're born, we are not encouraged generally to just do you, to just be myself. Because of society, social media is contributing huge to this. Our churches, right? You dress a certain way to go to church. You dress a certain way to go to school. You behave a certain way. Women do this. Men do that. Boys do this. Girls do that.
I can't remember it, but it was like when I know the story, but apparently my granddad hit the roof. But when I was really little, my mum, I have a sister. I'm one of 4 siblings as well, but there's a big gap between the other 2. But my sister and I were 11 months. No, not 13 months apart.
Oh wow!
So it was cold weather too, where we were. So
yeah.
But my for whatever, my mum dressed me up in girls' clothes. My granddad hit the roof, but that was the attitude. And like I said, I'm really grateful for it, because there's this juxtaposition that I had where so one area I'm like seeking approval, but the other side of I couldn't give a shit of what other people thought. So it was kind of really weird where I do stuff where it'd be like I didn't give a shit, and other times I'm really seeking approval, like with the girlfriend I mentioned. It's like, oh, what do you think? And it's like, so it's kind of really weird. I must have had split personality back then or something.
Well, but I mean, I think as kids, right? I think you do explore, and sure, I think we have like tendencies, which is interesting, right? But we see these people on social media now, like all of these non-binary and trans people and drag queens. I'm an enormous drag queen fan, and you can see people all over social media that are quite flamboyant, gender bending, men wearing makeup and dresses and things, and it is just ruffling the feathers of so many people. I mean, there's this huge business, this big kerfuffle online about like statements that J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, have made about transgender people and this whole cancel culture and all of this. And we see these people walking around that are doing it to the beat of their own drum. They are like bending the rules of society in terms of like gender and what men should do and what women should do. And it freaks a lot of people out. And that goes back to this, like, I am me and you are you. So if what you're doing, if you showing up to the grocery store or the party or whatever with your nails done and lashes on and lipstick and like a women's dress, but you're fully identifying as male and all of that, but you just want to wear that today, and I get all bejiggity about it, I personally think it's because I'm a little bit jealous that you're brave enough to just let it fly.
Yeah.
And I'm not.
Yeah. I think that, and that's where I get, because I got a little bit huffy on the word norm before, because you know, you talk about, partly because they talk about they say it's the male norm to be X, Y, and Z, not to cry, and it's like, from my experience, one, fuck off. That's not, and I say from my experience, it's not, because and because they talk about it's not tough to cry. Well, excuse me. I was posted to the SAS. We had people there that were like, you know, they were some of the most lethal people, you know, at the time. And well, I'm not going to get into cock banging who's the best special forces. They're the best of the best. Like, they know how to do things. But one of the guys who was that, I would say probably could be the most dangerous person there was, his hobby was sewing. That's what he did. He took in my pants when I lost a bit of weight. He took in my pants for me. That was his hobby. We had no problem hugging each other when there was there was an issue or something like that. When someone was feeling, we could talk about stuff. And these guys were like, I don't think you get much tougher as far as that. And so I'm going, this is not a norm. This is, if anything, that's a stereotype for cowardice, to say, I'm not going to share. And it was interesting. I'm drawing back from Mark Gungor here, where he talks about this, and he says back in, because I mean, I'm Polish, Ukraine, and Russian, as we've talked about before, but the Polish part is Catholic, so I have that upbringing, so I understand, the Adam and Eve and all that kind of stuff. And Mark Gungor highlights in one of his things. He talks about how he says, they go jokingly, where would you be without women? Oh, Garden of Eden. He's like, that's bullshit. Adam was a coward. He said, you don't read in the Bible that the snake come along and said, here, Eve, tastes the apple, that she turned around and she had to start searching for him. Adam, where are you? He was there and did nothing about it. Was how he described it. That's a coward. When you need to stand up and don't, or when you need help, or when you need, that's to me is a coward. And from my experience with the men that, and I'm getting really passionate now because it really pisses me off, because all the guys I know, they're I shouldn't say all, but all the guys that all the ones that I respect and associate with, let me put it that way, they're not jumping around going, oh, I'm a tough guy or whatever, but when called upon, they will stand up and do the right thing, regardless, at great sacrifice to themselves if need be. That's their character, and that's to me is the norm. And it's and worked with guys in you call it SWAT in the States, with TRG here and other different, where the police and those, where these guys are like full on if they need to be, but outside of it, you wouldn't know it speaking to them without the uniform on or whatever. But they've got that courage to stand up. I'm going on a rant now, sorry. I don't often get to talk about it. And it's like, oh man, it really annoys me that when we talk about the norm of it, because that's not my experience. And I think it's wrong to say, because I think we're talking about, as you say, people being themselves, whereas most of the guys, well, certainly all the guys that I associate with and are close with, they will stand up for what's right. They have that courage, and if someone's behaving inappropriately, and I see it all the time when someone's might be being sexist in a comment, they'll pull someone up. They have no problem doing that. It doesn't happen a lot that in our circle, because it's just not acceptable to do that.
Right.
And it's just, I don't even know where I'm going with that with the relationship, but maybe I just needed to get that out.
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad you got it out and like expressed some frustration, and hopefully, for people listening that it maybe your passion about it and what we're talking about, like just doing you, can give all of us, it's a reminder to sort of check ourselves first. Am I being myself, and am I allowing you, or am I trying to shut your individuality down because I'm uncomfortable with your individuality? And I think, again, it kind of goes back to the first thing that I always do is check in with myself. If I'm feeling some type of way, angry, anxious, nervous, irritated, the first stop is myself. Why? What's going on? What's going on inside of me? Why am I irritated? What do I need? Before I go like, why are you being an asshole? Why are you being like this? It's like, no, he reminds me of someone that was abusive to me, or, whatever it is, right? I wish I was as brave. I actually have wanted to be braver in my business and show up more authentically online. And the fact that you, sir, are in a dress here at the grocery store is triggering that for me, because I see you being brave when I am not being brave. So it actually has nothing to do with you, how I'm reacting to you being here. You are poking something in me. And so I think, we hear this like hold a mirror up all the time, which is kind of just one of those cliche terms that gets chucked around that makes you want to do a big eye roll. But it's a little bit like, cliches are that way kind of for a reason. But it is about just check yourself.
If you're really woke, you
check
should
yourself before you come for me.
Exactly,
right? Like check yourself before you come for me. And I think bringing it back to the topic of this, relationships, if we as humans did that, we checked ourselves first, we got curious, because really the only thing we have control over is ourself, how we react and how we act. If we checked with ourselves first, all of our relationships would be better for it, all of them. And better for it might be some need to go. Right? Sometimes that is the best thing for the relationship, is for it to end. And that's okay. And we're, again, kind of going back to what gets put in our basket, this idea that like marriage is sacred and it's ordained by God. And listen, if you're a faith person and that's what you believe, that's fine. But marriage is the only
point of that is find out before you actually get married too. Make sure you're in the right relationship. Be ready for a relationship too.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just like, I don't know. For me, this is a tangent for me, but it's just like, for me, marriage, I just am baffled that marriage is the only human to human relationship that is supposedly not allowed to be broken. If you and I are in business together, we have a bakery and the business isn't working out, and we are not compatible as owners and the business is failing, nobody's going to think it's weird that we dissolve the business and walk away and do something different. But everybody has something to say and feels some type of way about a marriage ending. And then if there's kids involved, fucking forget about it, right? Like then you're the worst kind of person. And I call bullshit to all of that. Sometimes the absolute best thing for the kids is for the marriage to break up. Had I not left my first marriage, my son would have had the blueprint that bickering and yelling and throwing bowls and telling each other to shut up and having your man, that he would be perfectly in the right to say to his woman, oh, look at that Victoria's Secret model and her lips. It looks like she just wants to put them all over something. What do you think that does to my self-esteem?
Yeah.
Like had I stayed, that my son would have grown up thinking that's how it is. That's how relationships go. This is how you behave.
Yeah.
Like, fuck that. Now I'm on my soapbox, but like
no.
fuck that. It's just, That is something I just cannot subscribe to. Now, I am 100% on board with the commitments that you make, right? So following through on your commitments, being in committed relationship, like I'm 100% on board with that. But this idea of like, I don't know, marriage, the certificate, the word of it, like it's all just so entangled and engrossed in church and all of that, that I just think it's an outdated concept. And
Well,
even though I am married, I'm
by
just
the
like,
rules, I mean, when you get married, you actually, I mean, certainly in a religious thing, because my first marriage was when we had wedding vows anyway. You make wedding vows to, and certainly from any religion, those wedding vows generally, if they're the religious, not ones you've made up, but if they're from the church, one is love, honor. Right? And if the person is not doing that, they're not abiding by the rules. So the contract is broken anyway. So why would you, if you're taking a business analogy, if someone breaks a contract, you either try and fix it or you end that contract. And if this person is not doing that, using that analogy, like you're saying, I 100% agree with you. It's not that there's anything wrong with ending that contract. The fact is, this person's not abiding by the terms that they entered into. So
totally, but
get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, but I'm going to play the devil's advocate for a little bit here, and we are falling into a whole nother topic. But going back to the Garden of Eden, I feel like that Adam and Eve story, God placed them, if you will, in a no-win situation. He put them in the garden and gave them the commandment to go out and like replenish the earth, like fill the earth with humans, right? But until Eve partook of the apple, they didn't recognize that they were naked, so they had no shame around. They didn't like know how, have the knowledge of how that all worked. So like they were given one commandment to go and do this thing, but without breaking the rules, they had no mechanism, no way to go and fulfill that commandment. And going back to the religious vows, yes, to love and honor is one of the vows, but so is in good or in bad till death do us part. So how do you reconcile that? You are trapped. You are set up to fail, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I mean, I get that what you're saying there, and I hadn't, because I was going blank on the wedding vows as to what they were. And good or bad till death do us part. But I don't. I mean, maybe this is my interpretation. I don't see that interpretation is if they're being a prick consistently, that's part of that bad, because that the first part is love and honor first. And if we're going order of precedent, being a contract person, order of precedent, that's the if I have to look at that's how I would interpret it. So being a contract person, it's like. But and I wouldn't, but I get where you're coming from that. You set up, it's like you're going, okay, and in good or bad till death do us part, yes, but I really find that hard to believe that the intention was that you're with someone that's a complete prick, and then that intention, that's going to be the relationship, because that's not how it was designed to be. It was
but if you look at clergy all around the world, particularly,
I think they got it wrong
so much today. They encourage women. I mean, how many stories have we heard of women saying, I went to my pastor, my priest, my bishop, my whatever, and told them that I was being beaten and abused at home. And they first said, well, marriage is a contract and you need to work it out and go to counseling and maybe try to not provoke them. And like, and that's the extreme side of it. But like, I hear what you're saying, and I agree. If we're going to be contract people, and the first one is that, and they're not doing that, then all of the other points below that sort of are out the window. I get that. But that is not the way it's run. And I think that's because, again, now we're way on a tangent, but that's because I think religion is run by humans, and particularly men. And then now we're really off on another.
That's right. We can go there. I'm quite happy to go there. But I was looking it up as you were talking, because I wanted to do this and taking it in this. So, and it's a wholeness is the way I look at it. And, I've specifically looked up traditional Christian vows, and it says, I take you to be my husband/wife, to have and to hold from this day forward. And then it says for better or worse. So better's first or worse.
Yeah.
Richer for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do us part. So, and I don't see, when I'm looking at that, I really don't, and maybe this is my interpretation, is that when we're talking about for better or for worse, they're not, because you're talking having to hold, for better or for worse, richer or poorer, sickness and in health, but that's not talking about behavior towards it. I mean, to love and cherish. That doesn't say, if you're, I don't know if that's, I don't know. I would find that was, given God is love, that it was intention, and we're going to use the extreme that you used, that he's in, that he I don't. It's often I got to almost gender neutral and I fucked it up.
But see, this I think what we're saying is that this is like the pickle we find ourselves in.
But I like, because I don't think that was, when we're talking about worse, they're talking about with the struggle that you will go through, and I don't even like using the word struggle, but the challenges that you're going to face in life together, like how to pay the mortgage, those kind of things. I think that's what they're talking about, better and worse. Not our relationship is, totally fucked up and I'm with someone who's abusive, who's punching me and that kind of stuff, or even psychological abuse. I don't think that was the intent, not if God is love, if that's true.
I 100% agree, because I do believe that God, the universe, whatever is out there, because there's the mystery. For me, it's the mystery, is love.
Yeah.
Is love. And yet we live in a society, in a world that is ruled by human beings and, frankly, men. And if we look historically as to when these vows and Christianity and the commandments and the Bible and all of that stuff are written, if you take the sort of divine intervention of it away and look at it just historically, what was happening historically in the world at the time of these things being written and all of that, if you can just, like, for a moment take the God out of it and just, like, as a historical text, it makes sense, some of these rules. But then at the time, like, women were nothing. We had to get married for protection. We couldn't own property. We couldn't own land. We couldn't have wealth. We had to be married. Our fathers got to choose. And then if we were with a man, like, and that some of that stuff has just stuck around and then created so much shame, not just for women, but for men. I mean, divorced men feel like, there's, oh, I wasn't a good enough man to keep her around. Oh, I didn't have my wife. I couldn't control my wife. I wasn't a good enough, like,
I never had the intention when I, was to get divorced. That wasn't the intention.
Totally.
I don't think anyone ever gets married to get divorced. That's not the.
Some maybe.
Well,
depending on how much money the other one had. No, I'm joking. But I hear what you're. I'm joking.
Yeah,
but yes,
need a green card. So.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's
exactly.
Yeah, but I hear what you're saying there too with regard to that, because this one that I've found is completely gender neutral, whereas if you go back, it was the woman's one had to obey in there as well, whereas the man's one didn't. I used to think it was neutral just because of the way I was brought up, as in the sense of both had to obey each other. But I didn't realize it was. I learned later that it wasn't the case. But I think maybe what we're coming here is like it's working out what are the right rules for you.
Exactly.
And that's where you're drawing that line and going, where is. Because when you're starting the relationship, first we keep coming back to that. It's you do need to know yourself and be like yourself. I think that's really important. I trained my son from a very early age, and so I always ask him, "Do you like yourself?" And he's like, "Yeah, Dad, I like myself." It's like, and he
that's so great.
And that was the only thing. So we had You know, when we were watching the Dune movie, we laughed because there's a scene where the I don't know if I told you this or not, but there's a scene where the father and the son are talking, and the son's to take over the expectation in the kingdom is that the son takes over the father's role, and they're having this chat about that, and the father turns to the son and says, "Look, whatever you do is up to you. You are already everything you ever need to be for me. You're my son, and that's it. It's entirely up to you." And we laugh because I'd been saying that to my son. It's like, I'm not telling you how to live your life. If you and basically I'd say, if you fuck it up, it's your problem. Don't go to a psych and tell him it's mine because he told me I had to be a doctor, I had to be whatever. It's like he'll probably go to the psych and said he didn't tell me to be a doctor. He didn't.
I mean, yeah,
it's not going to happen. But anyway.
No, but what you said, I think is really beautiful, and I think it sums it up lovely. And one of the one of my mantras in life, things that I live by. One of the things I live by is that, like, there's no right way to live life. There's only your way. That only you know what's best for you.
Yeah.
And going back to, like, God, universe, mystery, whatever created us is love. And for me, particularly as a woman, I have come to a place that I am their daughter. That is enough. Full stop.
I think that's really
just like
important.
What you say to your son. Yeah. Like,
so, because when I think about myself and my core, I talked about separating who you are from your behaviors. If I visualize it, inside me is this just massive ball of light. It's like,
exactly.
It's just amazing energy that's just wonderful, and I'm awesome. And yeah, I might fuck things up. Often fuck things up. That's the behavior, and go, all right, I fucked that up. And similar, I mean, it's how do we deal with things? So we're talking about relationships. I wanted to share this story. It just popped back into my head because we're talking about this communication. And one thing I don't think we've covered off in this conversation, but is because you mentioned about this do-over, the take two, which I love that. And sometimes even in the moment we need to take some time, and because I was working because I help a number of people in this space of Splitsville, let's say, where they're in the court space. So I help them with, because it's really messed up in that space, and you can actually do a lot better if you don't follow what, because a lot of I asked, back in the day, I was talking about, where do you find a good family lawyer? Because I have a lot of lawyer friends in the commercial space because of the work I do. And it's interesting that they all work in that space and they all had the same answer. They said there's no such thing, which was really fascinating. So I help a lot of people in that space. But what I've come to tell them is that, especially when you're dealing with the other person, if they send you a message or whatever, don't respond immediately. Take some time out. And I had that just recently, as in today, in a separate scenario for me, was with a board that I'm dealing with, one of the organizations that I'm involved with. So one of the board members sent out a public statement that was just I'd prepared something and then they altered it and just made it. It was, the analogy I can put is, as parents, I believe you should present a united front, even if you don't agree with each other, certainly in front of the children, or even publicly. If the other person's an ass, that's, go, okay. And then certainly in front of the children.
Right.
When you get home or when say, hey, that is not good. Yeah.
Totally.
And whereas this was just something that was just a message was sent out with two conflicting things in it, in the same paragraph, and it was like, oh my God! And now the shit's hit the fan. So I was about to write something. I went, hang on a minute, take a breath, stop, and then I over the course of the day, because it was this morning that it came up. And then we get to, I think it was 7 o'clock at night, and I crafted something to address that just within the board. And it was, okay, this is a problem here. We can use it for an opportunity, and this is my strategy for using it for an opportunity. And here's a way I can actually I'm not going to say fall on my sword, but I can take a bit of the heat here was what I used. I can take the heat and frame it this way. And so it gave them an out, maybe to save face a little bit, without me looking like I'm bad either. But if I had sent my initial response, it wouldn't have helped the situation a lot. Because even though I would have been right in what I was saying, I was technically correct in what I would have said. We wouldn't have dealt with the emotions very well. And that comes back to something I learned way too late in life. And it's not so much, people don't remember what you say. They remember how you make them feel. And it's amazing how that, for me, certainly changed the dynamic of, well, one, how I behave with people. When I go, okay, actually, it's not what I'm going to say. It's not about being right. How's this going to make them feel? And because if they're not feeling great, or if they're feeling defensive, I'm not going to get my point across at all. Which and that happens in a relationship. If you go, that's why, from my perspective, I say now it's like, when dealing with something, it's like, this is what I'm doing. This is what's important for me. Not you don't do that, or you upset me, or I felt this. I felt this from what you did. And that way, I'm owning it.
Yeah.
And I'm not being, attacking. Well, I mean, it depends. I mean, I've had that too, where the person's been a little bit insecure, so then they immediately just go, oh, that's a different part. But if you two reasonably whole people, and rather than say you did this, or I'm offended by that, or I don't like that behavior you do, say, well, I like this. I like the toothpaste rolled at the bottom. To use that example. And then the other person has an option as to what they want to do with that. And I find that seems.
Yeah, I think that developing that skill to pause is really huge, right? To just like take a beat and pause and be able to do it in the heat of the moment.
Yeah.
Where you particularly in a heated discussion with your partner, your boss, whatever relationship you're in, to just be like, I need a minute. I'm very emotional, and I find it hard to be clear on what it is exactly I want to say or how I want to feel. So I'm going to stop this conversation right now and walk away, and I will come back to it, but I need a minute.
Yeah. Because it's something, and because I have that I've got a negotiation program, which is fairly high end, but it's one of the key things in there is silence. Silence is a really massive source of power. Certainly, and I in a corporate environment, I've been able to do it really, really well. Personal has taken me a bit. It's ironic how you can do things in one area and not so much in the other. And in corporate environment, I was able to do it really well, where I could be really silent, no problem, just listen and all that. But in a personal relationship, it took me longer to develop that skill. I can do it now, really, really easy. A lot of times, I'd just be talking or someone's up, bothering, and I'll be, okay, just a minute, right? I'll listen. So what you're saying is this, and that kind of asking questions. I'm adding that in a dynamic to the leadership program as well, because my only resolution I had was to listen more, and I'm a pretty good listener, I think. And I've noticed that listening is a great way of leading. It's really fascinating, because a lot of times you think about a leader has to be this person that, and I come back to Nelson Mandela talked about, if I got the story correct, but it's a good story anyway, so I'm going to stick with it, that his dad was a chief, and when they met and all the other sub chiefs come in, if that's a word, they would go around the room, and before he said anything about what gave his opinion, he would have everyone else talk first. They go around the room all the time, and he would always speak last. And I look at that from a leadership perspective of how much, and I've noticed that when I'm in board meetings and things like that, where now I'm younger, I would I'd be chairing the meeting and I'd start the conversation sort of thing. Like now I kind of go, I just ask questions more, and it's just so much more powerful. And you actually lead from a stronger perspective. It's really insane about listening, but at the same time, it applies in a relationship.
Absolutely. 100%. And like in my coaching business, the people sometimes when they first, or if they're unfamiliar with coaching, they're like, so you tell people like what to do with their life. And I'm like, no, not at all. I mostly listen and let them talk, ask a couple of questions, but by listening and asking a few questions, more often than not, they come to the next step, the insight, the answer, if that's such a thing, themselves. I haven't lived your life. I can see things sometimes from a different perspective. So that's where the questioning comes in about like, could this also be a possibility? Or what do you think about this? Or how does this story or example land with you? When I say this, what comes up for you? Right. And the more you can listen and just kind of ask some of those questions, they'll talk themselves right to the healing that they need, or the next step they need to take, or the next, milestone or hurdle or barrier, whatever they want to break through, work on, achieve, whatever it is. They'll walk themselves there if I can just walk alongside, listening and asking a couple of questions. Like, oh, why is that? If we, to use the analogy of like walking along a path, why is that fence there? Oh, that's interesting. Why is that bench there? That's a beautiful art piece. Tell me about that.
Yeah.
And then they start to get some real clarity on themselves, which, listen, we've all grown up with far too many people and institutions and bullshit telling us who we should be and how we should act. You certainly don't need another coach to do that. You certainly don't need to pay someone to do that, right?
You just get on social media, you'll be fine. If you want to tell what to do, and
totally I was gonna say go to church. They've got plenty to tell you what to do.
But I just really the whole listening side of things. It's and I know it's obvious, and I've known this, but it's really so that was my New Year's resolution was to listen more. So I know I was a good listener beforehand, but the fact that I made it that choice, but it's just so obvious that if you're listening, you're gathering information. Another friend said, you got two ears, one mouth, use them in that proportion.
Right.
But it's, if we're talking a relationship and when we're listening as well, we're not just listening to the words, like, because this is the thing when we're starting a relationship with somebody as well, you're listening to what they're doing, how they're behaving, what are they, because those are the things that are going to piss you off. It's like, if they're sitting there fidgeting there, I used to have that with would play with my fingernails all the time. And I was like, and no matter how many times I said, don't do it, they still did it for like years. Right. And it was just something I accepted, but it was like, it still annoyed me, but that's part of listening as well. What's that behavior doing? And listening to yourself, what's that doing to you as well?
Right.
Right. So powerful.
It is. It really is. And I think to sort of put a pin in the relationship thing, or to bring it back, I think if the listeners could leave this discussion that we've had with one takeaway about how to have a better relationship, it would be to listen more.
Yeah, I think that's we've gone on for a while. I think that's where we've ended up, isn't it?
I think it is.
It's because we talked about finding yourself, but finding yourself is listening to your own self. Listening to your own inner wisdom, whether your own behaviors when you're with someone, listening to what they're doing, also listening to yourself again as to how you're reacting to what they're doing. Even if it's verbal conversation, it's what are they saying and how am I reacting to that? Love it.
Totally. Yeah. I think that's the key, is to listen more to yourself and others, as you so beautifully put. I think if we all did that more, be a better place all around in every relationship, not just our romantic ones, but in all of them. Listen to our kids more, our parents more, our friends, our siblings. our partners, our colleagues, the stranger.
Yeah.
I mean, we all just want to be seen and heard and felt loved and important. And I mean, what more can you do for someone to make them feel seen and important and meaningful than to listen to them, to give them your attention and listen? I mean, I love manchego cheese and wine, but I would much rather have my husband sit and really listen to what I'm saying to him than him to shower me with those things every day. You know?
I love that. I love that a lot. Wonderful. Thank you again. That's so much inspiration. And I'm going to be thinking of wine and cheese, even though I don't like either.
I'm like, I haven't had either of those things for a while. I don't know why it was such a theme today, but apparently, going back to our theme, listening to myself, my body is craving those things. So I'll have to go get that.
Sounds like you should definitely do that. Karey, it's been wonderful chatting as always. It's been, and the audience, listen, it's simple, but until next time, thank you very much for chatting again. It's so wonderful.
It has been fantastic, Damien. Thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you for being part of the Share.Care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes, for others and for you.